A thrilling story of redemption, love, passion, and new beginnings. She gave her purity to a man who harbored dark secrets. Years later, she discovers that what he left inside her would change not only her life, but the destiny of an entire fortune. Watch this story until the end. You'll be surprised by this story. If you like stories of love and romance, subscribe to this channel. Leave your comment. We post videos like this every day, continuing. Emily Hayes grew up among tides and silences, in the small town of Bayshore on the Oregon coast, where the Pacific waves crashed forcefully against the rocks and time seemed suspended between what was and what would never be. The only daughter of Martha, a seamstress who once had big dreams but now lived hunched over old machines, mending clothes for tourists and locals for a few dollars. Emily's father never had a face at home. He left when she was only 5, leaving behind just a faded photograph and the phantom smell of cheap cigarettes that still permeated the living room curtains. At 22, Emily had hands calloused from scrubbing floors of inns and vacation homes, but she kept her heart intact, protected by an invisible armor woven from small disappointments and stubborn hopes. She cared for her mother, who in recent months had been wasting away with a persistent cough that doctors at the health clinic couldn't properly explain. Between morning cleanings and extra work at night, Emily supported them both with a silent determination, always with her gaze turned toward the sea, where, deep in her soul, she believed that one day she would find a destiny different from the one life insisted on imposing on her. She had never truly loved. She had kissed some boys from town, danced at summer festivals, but never felt that fire on her skin that the soap operas her mother religiously watched at 9 o'clock spoke about. She had never been touched with the intensity that would make her tremble just from remembering. Emily lived in a kind of waiting, not knowing exactly for what, with a constant restlessness that made her walk along the beach at dusk, barefoot on the cold sand, watching the seagulls, and wondering if someday she would understand what it meant to be truly alive. Until Nathan Montgomery arrived. He didn't arrive with fanfare, didn't create a scandal in town. Nathan was the type of man who commanded silence, simply by existing, a magnetic presence that changed the atmosphere of any environment without him needing to say a single word. A discreet billionaire, heir to a fortune built on agribusiness and investments that nobody quite understood, he had a past surrounded by tragedies whispered through the corridors of New York high society, a wife who died in mysterious circumstances, scandals hushed by the power of money, rumors of depression and isolation that the family tried to hide at any cost. Nathan bought the old Vista Point estate, an abandoned property since the 90s that sat atop the hill with a privileged view of the entire stretch of beach. The imposing construction had been erected by a lumber baron at the beginning of the last century, but decades of abandonment had transformed it into a ghost of colonial architecture, surrounded by wild gardens and stories that no one dared tell. Out loud, there was talk of deaths, cursed inheritances, entire families that had disappeared without a trace. Nathan's arrival transformed Bayshore overnight. Nobody knew why such a rich and powerful man would choose voluntary exile in a little town lost on the map, far from the centers of power where he had always lived. Nobody dared to ask. But Emily, without wanting to, without looking, found in him something she didn't know she was seeking: the abyss. Their first meeting was an accident of fate. Emily had been hired to do the heavy cleaning of the mansion, a job that paid more than 3 weeks of cleaning at the inns. She went up to the second floor to clean a room where she shouldn't enter. The lawyer had been clear about the boundaries, but the door was ajar, and something pulled her inside. She found Nathan there, standing in front of an easel, painting a canvas that seemed unfinished for years. The image was of a woman without a face, wrapped in deep blue tones that resembled the sea in a storm. Emily stood motionless at the entrance, the bucket and rags forgotten in her hand, hypnotized by the scene. Nathan turned slowly as if he already knew she was there, and their eyes met in a silence that seemed to last for hours. He was older than her, perhaps by 15 years, with grey hair at the temples and a well-kept beard that couldn't hide the marks of an ancient sadness. There was something dark about him, a kind of melancholy that dragged like a shadow, but also a magnetic intensity that made Emily's legs weaken. "I'm sorry," she murmured, taking a step back. "I didn't know you were here." Nathan didn't respond immediately. He continued, observing her with those dark eyes that seemed to read secrets she didn't even know herself. When he finally spoke, his voice was deep, hoarse, as if he hadn't spoken to another person in a long time. "You can stay," he said simply. "You don't bother me." Emily should have left. She should have apologized again and returned to her tasks, but something kept her there, motionless, watching Nathan work. He painted with precise yet desperate movements, as if trying to capture something that always escaped at the last second. The woman in the painting gained contours with each brushstroke, but the face remained undefined, a gap that seemed intentional. "Who is she?" Emily heard herself asking, surprised by her own boldness. Nathan stopped painting and looked at the canvas with an expression that mixed love and torment. "Someone I should have known better," he answered. "Someone I may yet come to know." At that moment, something was established between them, a crack in destiny that neither was prepared to face. In the following days, Emily began to be called to the mansion with increasing frequency. There was always something new to clean, some room that needed special attention, some task that inexplicably only she could perform. Emily began to notice that Nathan was always nearby when she worked, observing her without directly interacting, speaking little, but with a weighty gaze that left her restless and at the same time awakened sensations she had never experienced. He was inaccessible, full of social codes that Emily didn't understand, polite in a manner that betrayed decades of privilege, but gradually the bond between them thickened in an almost imperceptible way, silent exchanges of glances, involuntary gestures when he handed over the weekly payment and their fingers touched by chance, contained desires that grew like plants in the dark, nourished by attention that neither dared to name. Emily began to dream about him. She would wake up in the middle of the night with burning skin, her body asking for something she couldn't define. During the day, while cleaning the immense rooms of the mansion, she caught herself imagining what it would be like to be touched by those hands that painted with such delicacy. Nathan, for his part, seemed to be fighting invisible demons. Sometimes Emily found him standing on the veranda, looking at the sea, with an expression of such profound pain that she felt the urge to console him, even though she didn't know how. Emily's mother was getting worse every day. The cough had transformed into a constant shortness of breath, and the medicines from the clinic were no longer effective. Emily worked double to pay for private consultations in Portland, but the money was never enough. Nathan, who observed everything in silence, one day left an envelope on the kitchen table of the mansion. "For your mother," he said, when Emily protested. "It's not a favor. It's a necessity." That night, Emily cried for the first time in years, not just for her mother's illness, but for the confusion of feelings that Nathan awakened in her. Gratitude, desire, fear, hope, all mixed in an emotional storm that left her exhausted and alive at the same time. The explosion happened on a Tuesday in March, when an unexpected storm swept the coast. Emily had stayed late at the mansion, finishing the cleaning of the library, when the first lightning bolts cut across the sky. The rain started slowly, but in a matter of minutes transformed into a deluge that cut off the road and left Emily unable to return home. "You can stay," said Nathan when she explained the situation, but there was something different in his voice, an urgency she had never noticed before. Emily called her mother, who was fine, being cared for by Mrs. Rose, the neighbor, and settled in the living room, watching the rain beat against the huge windows. Nathan brought coffee and sat in the armchair next to the sofa where she was, the two in silence, listening to the sound of the storm outside. "Why did you come here?" Emily suddenly asked, the words escaping before she could contain them. Nathan took time to respond. When he did, his voice sounded like a confession. "Because I was dying inside in New York, because I lost the only person I ever loved, and I couldn't pretend to be alive anymore. Because here, at the end of the world, I thought I could disappear in peace." "And did you?" Nathan looked into her eyes, and Emily felt something melt inside her chest. "Until you arrived," he said. The silence that followed was charged with an unbearable tension. Emily felt her heart beating so hard that she was sure Nathan could hear it. He rose from the armchair and walked to the window, hands resting on the sill, the muscles of his back tense beneath his white shirt. "Emily," he said without turning, "you should leave, away from me, away from this house." "Why?" "Because I'm not a good man, because I've destroyed everything I've touched, because you deserve someone who can give you the world, not someone who has already lost his soul." Emily stood up slowly, her heart racing. She walked to him, stopping a few inches from his back. "What if I don't want the world?" she whispered. "What if I just want you?" Nathan turned in an abrupt movement, and before Emily could breathe, he pulled her against his chest, his hands tangled in her hair, his mouth finding hers in a desperate, hungry kiss, full of months of contained desire. Emily surrendered completely, without reservations, without fear, as if that moment was the only real thing she had ever experienced in life. They made love, right there, in the living room, with the rain tapping on the windows and the lightning illuminating their intertwined bodies. Emily gave Nathan everything she was, her virginity, her innocence, her entire soul, without thinking of the consequences. And Nathan, who had promised himself never to get close to anyone after his wife's death, yielded to the only thing that made him feel alive again, the only light that had managed to pierce the darkness he had been living in for years. That night, while Emily slept, nestled in his arms, Nathan stayed awake, watching her breathe, knowing that he had crossed a line from which there would be no return, knowing also that for the first time since the tragedy that had destroyed his life, he felt something beyond pain. He felt hope, and that, somehow, was even more frightening than despair. The days that followed that stormy night transformed Emily into a different woman. She woke up with her skin still burning from the memories of Nathan's touch, with her body asking for more of that man who had awakened sensations in her that she didn't know existed. She returned to the mansion, every day with a sweet anxiety in her chest, pretending normalcy while feeling his gaze burning her back as she worked. Nathan had also changed. The ancient sadness he carried in his eyes hadn't completely disappeared, but now it was tempered by something new, an intensity that he directed entirely toward Emily. He observed her with a barely disguised hunger, and when their hands touched, by chance during daily tasks, they both felt an electric current that left them breathless. In the second week after that first night, Nathan could no longer maintain the distance. Emily was cleaning the library when he appeared at the door, leaning on the doorframe, observing her with that look she had already learned to recognize. "Emily," he said, his voice hoarse with contained desire. She turned, and one look was enough for her to know exactly what he wanted, what she also wanted, with an urgency that frightened and excited her at the same time. Nathan walked to her slowly, like a predator who knew his prey wouldn't flee, and when he kissed her against the bookshelf, Emily felt her legs weaken again. They made love right there, on the library floor, among piles of classic books and the smell of aged wood. Later, in Nathan's bedroom, in an immense bed that had a view of the sea. And again, in the kitchen, in the early hours, when Emily went down for water and found Nathan sitting at the table, sleepless, painting sketches of her from memory. "Can't you sleep?" she asked, covering her naked body with only his shirt. "I can't stop thinking about you," admitted Nathan, pulling her onto his lap. "You've made me addicted, Emily. It's dangerous." Dangerous? Why? Nathan hesitated, and in that silence, Emily realized there were layers to him that she still didn't know, secrets that he guarded like dark treasures. "Because I don't know how to love without destroying," he said finally. "And you're too pure to be destroyed." Emily laughed softly, kissing his neck. "Then teach me to be impure. Teach me not to be afraid." And Nathan taught her. In the weeks that followed, he initiated her into pleasures she never imagined, existed, made her discover parts of her own body she didn't know, made her scream with pleasure in every room of that mansion. Emily surrendered to him with an insatiable thirst, as if she were recovering years of unlived life. But it wasn't just sex. Between the nights of passion, there were moments of intimacy that touched Emily even more deeply. Nathan cooked for her, sophisticated dishes he had learned on travels around the world, told stories of places he had visited, showed rare books from his private library. Emily, in turn, talked about her simple childhood, the small dreams she had as a child, her relationship with her mother. "She's better," Emily said one afternoon, as they lay in bed watching the sunset paint the sea orange. "The medicines you paid for are working. I don't know how to thank you." Nathan was silent for a long moment, his fingers playing with her hair. "You don't need to thank me for anything, Emily. Ever." There was something in his voice that intrigued her. But when she tried to ask, Nathan distracted her with kisses that made her forget everything. The first crack in the perfection of those days appeared on a Thursday afternoon when Emily arrived at the mansion and found Nathan on the phone, speaking in a low voice with someone. She didn't want to listen, but the words reached her without her being able to avoid it. "Yes, I know what I'm doing." "No, she doesn't know anything yet. It's too early to tell the truth. I know the risks, Vincent, but this is something I need to resolve alone." Emily stood motionless at the kitchen entrance, her heart racing. Who was Vincent? What truth was Nathan hiding? What risks? When Nathan hung up and turned around, he found Emily standing there, her face pale. "How long have you been there?" he asked, his voice tense. "Long enough," replied Emily. "What were you talking about, Nathan? What truth are you hiding from me?" Nathan ran his hand through his hair, a gesture of nervousness that Emily had learned to recognize. "Emily, there are things about me, about my past, that are complicated to explain. Then explain. I deserve to know." Nathan looked at her for a long moment, and Emily saw an internal struggle happening behind those dark eyes. "Not now," he said finally. "It's not time yet." "When will it be?" "When I'm certain I won't lose you." The answer should have reassured Emily, but it had the opposite effect. A seed of distrust was planted that day, and it began to grow slowly, nourished by small signs that she had previously ignored. The way Nathan sometimes observed her, as if he were studying her. The calls he took in another room. The papers he quickly put away when she came near. 2 weeks later, Emily discovered she was pregnant. The discovery came on an ordinary morning when she woke up nauseated for the third time that week. She bought a test at a pharmacy in Tillamook, a neighboring town where nobody knew her, and when she saw the 2 pink lines, the world seemed to stop. She was pregnant with Nathan's child. She carried inside her the child of the man she loved, more than her own life, but who also hid secrets that were beginning to haunt her. Emily sat in the pharmacy bathroom for 20 minutes, alternating between laughter and tears, trying to process the magnitude of what was happening. She decided to tell Nathan that same night. She prepared a special dinner using the expensive pots in the mansion's kitchen and waited for him to arrive from a quick trip to Portland that he had made during the day. When Nathan entered the house, Emily was in the living room, nervous, mentally rehearsing the words. "You look beautiful," he said, kissing her slowly. "What special occasion is this?" "I need to tell you something," Emily replied, her hands trembling. Nathan noticed the tension in her voice and immediately became serious. "What is it? Did something happen to your mother?" "No," Emily took a deep breath. "Nathan, I'm pregnant." The silence that followed seemed to last an eternity. Nathan stood motionless, his face passing through a series of expressions that Emily couldn't decipher. Surprise, fear, pain, and something that could be joy, all mixed in an emotional storm. "Are you sure?" he asked finally. "Absolutely." Nathan stepped back a few paces, running his hands over his face, and Emily felt her heart sink. That wasn't the reaction she expected. "Nathan," she called, aren't you happy?" He turned to her with shining eyes. From unshed tears or something more intense, Emily couldn't tell. "Happy," he repeated. "Emily, I spent the last 10 years thinking I would never be a father again, that I would never have a family again." Nathan walked to her and pulled her into his arms, burying his face in her neck. "You've given me everything," he whispered. "You've given me life back." That night, they made love with a different intensity, deeper, almost desperate. Nathan touched Emily as if she were made of crystal, his hands caressing the still flat belly where the baby was growing. Emily felt complete for the first time in her life, as if all the pieces of the puzzle had finally fit together. But the happiness didn't last long. 3 days later, while Nathan was on another of his mysterious trips to Portland, Emily decided to organize his office in the mansion. It was a room he always kept locked, but that day he had forgotten the key on the kitchen table. Emily had no underhanded intentions. She just wanted to clean and organize as a surprise for when he returned. That's when she found the folder. A brown leather folder hidden in the locked drawer of the desk, full of papers, photos, and documents that made Emily's blood freeze in her veins. There were photos of her, dozens of photos taken without her knowledge from when she was a teenager. Detailed reports about her life, her family, her routine, copies of her mother's documents, medical records, even bank statements. But what shocked her most was a death certificate. Isabella Christine Montgomery died at 28, Nathan's wife, in circumstances that the document classified as a domestic accident. In the attached photo, Emily saw a woman who could be her twin sister. The same dark hair, the same green eyes, the same face shape. With trembling hands, Emily leafed through the rest of the documents. She found a medical report dated 6 months earlier, exactly the period when Nathan had arrived in Bayshore, diagnosing severe depression and self-destructive tendencies. She also found a legal document, a kind of contract with a private detective from New York, hired to find women with a specific profile in the Pacific Northwest region. The truth fell upon Emily like a landslide. Nathan hadn't found her by chance. He hadn't hired her by coincidence. He had deliberately searched for her, had investigated her entire life, even before moving to Bayshore. He had chosen her for her physical resemblance to his dead wife. Emily vomited right there on the office floor, her body rejecting the devastating revelation. She wasn't the woman Nathan loved. She was just a substitute for someone he couldn't forget. A replacement doll, a cheap copy of a lost love. When she managed to compose herself, Emily put everything back exactly as she had found it and ran out of the mansion. She arrived home in a state of shock, found her mother in the kitchen preparing lunch. "My child, what's that face? You look like you've seen a ghost." Emily couldn't speak. She hugged her mother and cried like she hadn't since childhood, unable to explain what she had discovered. How could she say that the man she loved, the father of the child she carried in her womb, had transformed her entire life into a lie? That night, when Nathan returned from his trip and looked for her, Emily pretended to have a headache and said she needed to sleep at home to take care of her mother. Nathan found it strange. She had never refused to spend the night with him, but didn't insist. For 3 days, Emily avoided the mansion, inventing excuses, buying time to decide what to do. Nathan called constantly, sent messages, even appeared at her house once, but she asked her mother to say she was sleeping. On the 4th day, she made the most difficult decision of her life. Emily packed a small suitcase, left a letter for her mother explaining that she needed to travel for a while, and took the first bus to Portland. From there, she bought a ticket to New York and then to San Francisco. She had no plan, didn't have enough money for a long time, but had one certainty. She could no longer look at Nathan without seeing the lie her life had become. In the letter she left for him, she wrote only, "I know everything. About Isabella, about the investigation, about what I really represent to you. Don't look for me. Our story ended before it even began, because it was never really ours." Nathan found the letter the same day, left on the windowsill of the room where they met. He read it once, twice, 10 times, until the words became blurs on the page. Then, for the first time since his wife's death, Nathan Montgomery cried. He cried for the woman he had lost, for the woman he had just lost, and for the child he might never know. Emily had disappeared, taking with her not only the baby they were expecting, but also the only light that had managed to pierce the darkness in which he lived. And Nathan knew, with a certainty that tore him apart, that this time the loss had been entirely his fault. 3 years and 2 months later, Emily Hayes lived a completely different life in a simple loft in the Mission District of San Francisco, with a view of the bay and the Golden Gate Bridge in the distance. She had reinvented herself as an art restorer in an underground gallery downtown, a job for which she discovered she had a natural talent, and that paid enough to support herself and little Lily, her 2.5-year-old daughter, who carried, in her dark eyes, all the intensity of the father she had never known. Emily had tried to forget Nathan with the determination of someone who knows that survival depended on it. In the first months in San Francisco, she had cried every night, hugging her pillow, feeling her belly grow and wondering if she had made the right choice. The delivery was lonely, in a public hospital in the Mission, with no one to hold her hand when Lily came into the world screaming, with a dark head of hair and a strong cry that made Emily laugh and cry at the same time. Raising Lily alone had been the most difficult and most transformative experience of her life. Emily discovered strength she didn't know she possessed, a fierce determination that made her work double, study at night, take online restoration courses while the girls slept. She got the job at Metamorphosis Gallery through a casual recommendation. The owner, Robert Ferguson, an eccentric 60-year-old San Franciscan who collected contemporary art and had a clinical eye for hidden talents, was impressed by the way Emily had restored a damaged canvas that she had brought just for a test. "You have the hands of an angel and the eyes of a detective," Robert said on the day he officially hired her. "You can see what's behind the layers of paint, understand what the artist really wanted to say. It's a rare gift." Emily dedicated herself to the work with a passion that surprised her. She discovered that restoring old paintings was like therapy. Each brushstroke, each recovered pigment, each detail that resurfaced from oblivion made her feel that she was also healing inside. The gallery specialized in art by unknown American artists, works that arrived in deplorable condition, and that Emily returned to life with patience and refined technique. During those 3 years, Emily built a safe and predictable routine. She woke up at 6 to give Lily breakfast, left the girl at the municipal daycare 2 blocks from home, took the cable car downtown, worked from 8 to 5, picked up Lily, returned home, had dinner, played with her daughter, put her to bed, and then studied or worked on personal projects until late. On weekends, she took Lily to Baker Beach or to Golden Gate Park, teaching the girl to love San Francisco the same way she had learned to love Bayshore. Emily had dated only 2 men in those 3 years. Nothing serious, just dinners and a few nights that left her emptier than before. The problem was that everyone seemed dull compared to the intensity she had experienced with Nathan. No touch awakened the fire he had ignited in her skin. No gaze carried the depth of those dark eyes that still visited her in dreams. Lily was the only true light in her life. The girl had inherited not only her father's eyes, but also a restless intelligence that made her ask disconcerting questions. For her age, at 2 years old, she already spoke in complete sentences and demonstrated an inexplicable fascination with paintings. Whenever Emily brought work home, Lily would be hypnotized watching her mother restore the canvases, as if she instinctively understood what was happening. "Mommy, why is the man in the painting sad?" Lily asked one Sunday afternoon, pointing to a male portrait from the 19th century that Emily was restoring. "How do you know he's sad, sweetheart?" "His eyes, they're like yours when you think I'm sleeping." Moments like this made Emily realize how much she still carried Nathan inside her, no matter how much she tried to bury that pain. There were nights when she woke up breathless, dreaming of his hands on her skin, his hoarse voice whispering her name. There were afternoons when she saw a gray-haired man on the street, and her heart raced for a few seconds, until she realized it was just a stranger. Emily's mother had died 1.5 years earlier, taken by the lung disease that the expensive medicines had only managed to delay. Emily returned to Bayshore for the funeral, left Lily with a friend in San Francisco, and spent 3 days in the little town she had once called home. She avoided passing near Vista Point Estate, but couldn't avoid hearing the comments from neighbors. "That man disappeared off the map," said Mrs. Rose, the former neighbor. "They say he went back to New York. Others say he went abroad. The mansion has been closed for more than 2 years." Emily feigned disinterest, but the information haunted her throughout the entire trip back to San Francisco. Nathan had gone away. Maybe he had married again, found another substitute for his dead Isabella. The possibility hurt her more than she expected. Everything seemed at peace in Emily's carefully constructed life until that Tuesday in April, when a letter arrived addressed only with her name, no return address, with the postmark deliberately smudged. Emily opened it distractedly, thinking it was advertising, but when she read the contents, her hands began to tremble. "Emily, you don't know the truth about what happened to Nathan. He is not the man you think he is, but he is also not the monster you imagine. If you want answers, return to Bayshore. Look for Vista Point Estate. Go alone. There are things that only you can discover. A person who stood by him until the end." No signature, just ordinary paper, but it carried a subtle, almost imperceptible perfume that awakened a memory that Emily couldn't identify. For a week, Emily tried to ignore the letter. She tore it up, threw it away, tried to convince herself that it was a prank from someone cruel. But the words came back to haunt her every night. You don't know the truth. Not the monster you imagine. A person who stood by him until the end. What did until the end mean? Had Nathan died? Had he killed himself? The possibility made Emily spend an entire night awake, watching Lily sleep and wondering if she had the right to deprive her daughter of knowing the truth about her father, whatever it might be. At the end of the second week, Emily made a decision that frightened her with its sudden determination. She asked Robert for a week off, left Lily with Carla, her best friend and neighbor, and bought a ticket to Portland. She didn't tell anyone the true reason for the trip. She invented a story about documents from her mother's inheritance that she needed to resolve. The bus trip to Bayshore was an emotional torture. With each mile, Emily felt the past, returning like a wave that dragged her back to a time she had tried to forget. When she finally arrived in the little town, late on a Thursday afternoon, the sun was setting over the sea, painting the sky with the same orange and pink tones she remembered from childhood. Emily rented a room in a simple inn downtown and spent the rest of the afternoon walking on the beach, trying to gather courage for what she had to do. The town had changed little. Some new restaurants, one or two new buildings, but essentially it remained the same peaceful haven it had always been. The next morning, Emily climbed the road leading to Vista Point Estate. Her heart was beating, so hard that she stopped several times to catch her breath, not because of the physical effort, but because of the avalanche of memories that each curve of the road awakened. When she finally reached the property gate, she was shocked by what she saw. The mansion was impeccable, the gardens well kept, the windows clean and open. There was a car parked in front, a black Audi that Emily didn't recognize. Someone was living there. She rang the doorbell with trembling hands, and after a few minutes the door opened, revealing a man she had never seen. Tall, elegant, about 40, well-cut brown hair, and intelligent blue eyes. He wore an impeccable white shirt and tailored pants, as if he had stepped out of a men's fashion magazine. Emily Hayes, he said without surprise, as if he had been expecting her. My name is Adrian Lawrence. Please come in, we have a lot to talk about. Emily hesitated on the doorstep. The man knew her name, obviously had anticipated her arrival, but there was something about that perfect smile that made her uncomfortable. Were you the one who wrote to me? She asked. Not directly, but I know who did. Come in, Emily. I promise I'll answer all your questions. Emily entered the mansion and was immediately hit by a wave of memories. Everything was exactly as she remembered. The furniture, the decoration, even the smell of the house. But there was something different, an atmosphere she couldn't define. Adrian led her to the living room, where she and Nathan had made love for the first time. Emily felt her legs weaken and leaned on the arm of the armchair. Sit down, said Adrian, noticing her discomfort. I know it must be difficult to be here again. Where is Nathan? Emily asked directly. And who are you? Adrian served 2 coffees from a tray that was already prepared on the center table. Another sign that he knew she would come. I'm the curator of Nathan's artistic estate, he said, handing a cup to Emily. I was hired by the family to take care of his assets after what happened to him. What happened to him? Emily asked, her voice almost coming out as a whisper. Adrian made a dramatic pause, observing Emily over the coffee cup. Nathan disappeared 8 months ago, he said finally, simply vanished, leaving behind only a letter saying he couldn't bear to live anymore. The police classified it as a possible suicide, but they never found the body. The family is trying to declare presumed death to resolve legal issues of inheritance. Emily felt the world spin around her. Nathan had disappeared. He was possibly dead, and she had spent 3 years hating a man who might have died of heartbreak. But Continued Adrian, I don't believe he killed himself. I believe someone harmed Nathan, and I believe you can help me discover the truth. Why me? Adrian stood up and walked to a bookshelf from which he retrieved an object that made Emily catch her breath. It was a brown leather diary, partially, burned at the edges but still legible, because he wrote about you a lot. For 3 years, Nathan filled this diary with memories of you two, with confessions about what really happened between you, and with secrets about his past that change everything you think you know about him. Emily extended her hand with trembling fingers and took the diary. When she opened it to the first page, she saw Nathan's familiar handwriting and felt tears spring to her eyes. Emily, if you're reading this, it means something happened to me. And it means that someone finally had the courage to tell you the truth that I never knew how to tell you personally. Emily closed the diary immediately, unable to continue reading at that moment. Take it home, said Adrian gently. Read it calmly. But Emily, there are things in this diary that will shock you. Things about the death of Nathan's wife, about his family, about the real reason why he sought you out. I know about Isabella, said Emily. I know he chose me because I look like her. Adrian slowly shook his head. You don't know anything, Emily. That's just the surface of a much more complex and much more dangerous truth. Emily was silent for a long moment, processing everything she had just heard. Why are you doing this? She finally asked. Why are you helping me? Adrian hesitated for the first time since the conversation began, and Emily noticed a subtle change in his expression. Because Nathan was more than a client to me, he said, and because you're not the only person who was affected by the secrets of the Montgomery family. There was something in the way he said this that made Emily shiver. Something personal, intimate, that he wasn't completely revealing. You can stay here tonight, offered Adrian. The house has many rooms and I think you'll want time to read the diary. Tomorrow, if you want, I can show you other things Nathan left. Paintings, letters, documents that can help understand what really happened. Emily knew she should refuse, that she should take the diary and return to the inn. But something kept her there. A mixture of curiosity, pain, and an inexplicable attraction to Adrian himself, who seemed to know her better than he should. All right, she said. But I want answers, all of them, and you'll have them, promised Adrian, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. All of them. That night, Emily settled into the guest room upstairs, far from the room where she had slept so many times in Nathan's arms. She sat on the bed with the diary in her hands and began to read, preparing herself to discover truths that could change everything she thought she knew about the man she had loved and lost. From downstairs, the sounds of Adrian moving about. The house reached her, preparing something in the kitchen. There was a domesticity in those noises that both reassured and disturbed her, as if she were being carefully enveloped in a web whose dimensions she still couldn't comprehend. Emily opened the diary to the first page and began to read about a Nathan she had never known, vulnerable, tormented, passionate in a way that went far beyond what she had imagined. And with each line, with each intimate confession he had recorded on those pages, Emily felt she was being pulled back into an emotional abyss from which it had taken her 3 years to escape. But this time, there was something different about the fall. This time, she wasn't falling alone. Emily spent the entire night reading Nathan's diary, tears spattering the yellowed pages as she discovered truths that completely rewrote everything she thought she knew about the man she had loved. The first entries dated from a few days after her escape from Bayshore, and the pain in Nathan's words was almost palpable. She discovered about Isabella, about the investigation, but she didn't discover the most important thing. She didn't discover that Isabella didn't die in an accident. That she was murdered by her own family, by Vincent and my father, because she was pregnant with another man's child and threatened to expose the financial crimes that have sustained our fortune for decades. She didn't discover that I sought her out, not because Emily resembled Isabella, but because Emily was the only pure person I've known in my entire miserable life. The physical resemblance was just a cruel coincidence of fate. Emily stopped reading, her heart racing. Isabella had been murdered? Nathan knew about this? Why had he never told her? In the following pages, Nathan revealed the true reason for his move to Bayshore. He had discovered evidence of his wife's murder, documents that Vincent and the family patriarch, Edward Montgomery, had hidden for years. Nathan had planned to expose everything, to destroy the family empire built on blood and lies. But first, he needed to hide until he gathered enough courage to face his family. I found Emily by chance that first day, cleaning the room. But when I saw her, when I looked into those green eyes, I knew I had found something I wasn't looking for, a reason to want to stay alive. The investigation I conducted on her was done afterward, a desperate attempt to protect her from myself, to understand if she would be strong enough to withstand the storm that I represented. Emily turned the page with trembling hands, finding an entry that made her sob aloud. Emily fled today. She took our child in her womb and my soul with her. I can't blame her. I shouldn't have lied. Should have told her about Isabella from the first kiss, but how to explain that I loved Emily in a way I never loved Isabella? How to say that Isabella was an arranged marriage, a family obligation, while Emily was the first free choice I made in life? How to admit that I sought her, not as a substitute, but as salvation? The subsequent entries documented Nathan's descent into hell. Severe depression, sleepless nights, frustrated attempts to find Emily and the child. He had hired detectives, traveled across the country, spent fortunes trying to locate them, always hitting dead ends. Vincent is pressuring me to sign documents, transferring my controlling stake to him. He claims I'm mentally unstable, that I need treatment. Father died last month, taking to the grave the confession about Isabella that I never managed to extract from him. Now it's just me against Vincent, and he has the entire family on his side. They want to commit me by force. Emily rose from the bed, needing air. She went down to the kitchen in search of water and found Adrian awake, sitting at the table, working on a laptop. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, looking up from the computer. "How could I?" Emily replied, showing the diary. "Did you know all this? About Isabella, about Vincent?" Adrian closed the laptop slowly, studying Emily's face. "I knew a lot, not everything. Why didn't you tell me yesterday?" "Because you needed to read it in his words. You needed to understand the truth from Nathan's perspective." Emily poured herself some water and sat at the table, observing Adrian. In the soft kitchen light, he looked even more handsome, but there was something too calculated about his gestures, something too rehearsed about his words. "Who are you really, Adrian?" she asked. "And don't tell me you're just an art curator." Adrian smiled, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. "You're smarter than I thought. Answer the question." Adrian stood up and walked to the window, looking at the sea that shimmered under the full moon. "I'm Vincent Montgomery's son," he said finally. "Illegitimate son, recognized only when Vincent needed someone from the family to take care of the delicate matters related to Nathan's disappearance." Emily felt her blood freeze. Adrian was Nathan's nephew, part of the family conspiracy. "Why did you bring me here? To convince me to give up any right to the inheritance?" "Initially, yes," admitted Adrian, turning back to her. "Vincent discovered through the detectives Nathan had hired that you had his daughter. That complicated the plans to take full control of the fortune. My job was to find you, seduce you if necessary, and convince you to sign documents giving up any rights for you or the child. Emily stood up abruptly, the chair almost toppling. So all this is a lie? The diary, the revelations. The diary is real, Adrian said quickly. The revelations are true. But Emily, something changed when I met you yesterday. Something I didn't expect. What? Adrian walked up to her, stopping a few inches away, his blue eyes shining with an intensity that Emily recognized but that frightened her. I fell in love with you. In less than 24 hours, you managed to do something that no woman had done in 40 years of my life. Emily backed up, leaning against the sink. You're lying. It's part of the plan. If it were part of the plan, I wouldn't be telling you the truth now, said Adrian. If it were part of the plan, I wouldn't be about to take you to where Nathan really is. Emily's heart stopped. Nathan is alive but imprisoned. Vincent managed to commit him to a private psychiatric clinic in Newport under a false identity. Officially, Nathan died. In practice, he's been kept sedated and isolated for 8 months, while Vincent assumes total control of the family business. Emily leaned on the sink, her legs failing. Why are you telling me this? Because I want you to choose, said Adrian, approaching again. I can take you to Nathan. I can help you get him out of there, expose Vincent, destroy the entire conspiracy, but after that, you'll have to decide. Decide what? Whether you want to try to rebuild a life with a man destroyed by the past, surrounded by tragedies and enemies, or whether you want to start a new life with me, a safe, quiet life, away from all this madness. Emily looked at Adrian for a long moment. He was handsome, charming, apparently in love with her. He represented stability, security, a future without the dark ghosts that haunted Nathan. But when she closed her eyes, she still felt the intensity of Nathan's touch, still heard his hoarse voice whispering her name on stormy nights. Take me to him, she said finally. Adrian nodded, a shadow of sadness passing over his face. All right. But Emily, regardless of what you decide afterward, know that the last 2 days were the best of my life. They departed before dawn in Adrian's black Audi, headed for Newport. During the 3-hour journey, Adrian explained the details of the operation. The clinic was owned by a friend of the Montgomery family, specializing in treating inconvenient people from high society. Nathan was registered as a patient with severe personality disorder, with no right to visits or contact with the outside world. How will we get him out of there? Asked Emily. I have a fake court order, forged documents, and a lawyer who owes favors to the family, explained Adrian. Vincent didn't expect me to turn against him. That gives us an advantage. When they arrived at the clinic, a modern building hidden among the coastal mountains, Emily felt a mixture of terror and anticipation. In a few minutes, she would again see the man she had loved and hated, who she had fled from, and who now needed her rescue. The plan worked perfectly. Adrian's lawyer, Mr. Henry Moore, presented himself as Nathan's legal representative, with documents authorizing his transfer to another clinic. The staff, accustomed to not asking questions about wealthy patients, released Nathan without resistance. When Emily saw him being pushed in a wheelchair through the clinic's antiseptic corridors, she almost didn't recognize him. Nathan had lost weight dramatically. His hair was long and disheveled, his beard unkempt. But when their eyes met, Emily saw that he was still there, behind the fog of medications and months of isolation. Emily, he whispered, his voice rough. From disuse. Are you real? Emily knelt in front of the wheelchair, holding his face between her hands. I'm real. I've come to get you. Nathan began to cry, silent tears running down his gaunt face. I knew you would come, he said. I knew one day you would discover the truth. The reunion was interrupted by Adrian's phone ringing. He answered, and Emily saw his expression change drastically. "Vincent found out," he said, hanging up. "Family people are coming here. We need to leave, now!" They placed Nathan in the back seat of the car and left the clinic at high speed. On the way back, Nathan gradually regained his lucidity, the effects of the medications diminishing. He told about the months of horror in the clinic, the electroshock sessions that Vincent had authorized, the attempts to make him sign documents while sedated. "He wanted to declare me dead," said Nathan, "but he needed me to sign a power of attorney first. Since I refused, he decided to keep me alive, but incapacitated." When they arrived at Vista Point Estate, the sun was setting. Nathan managed to walk with help, and Emily led him to the bedroom where they had slept together so many times. She helped him bathe, shave, to again look like the man she had known. "You look beautiful," said Nathan when they finally sat on the bed, he wearing clean clothes that Adrian had provided. "More womanly, stronger. Motherhood has been good too." "Lily looks like you," said Emily. "She has your eyes, your stubbornness." "Lily?" repeated Nathan, smiling for the first time. "Beautiful name." "It's what I was looking at the night she was conceived. The lilies in your garden." They were silent for a moment, decades of pain and misunderstandings hovering between them. "Emily," Nathan finally said, "I'm so sorry for everything, for the lies, the secrets, for letting you discover everything in the worst possible way." "I'm sorry too," replied Emily, "for running away without giving you a chance to explain, for depriving you of the first years of our daughter's life." Nathan took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "Can we start over?" he asked. "Can we try to build the family we always dreamed of?" Emily looked into his eyes, seeing the man she had loved behind the suffering of recent years. But she also thought of Adrian, who had risked everything to help her, who offered a simpler, safer life. "Nathan," she said slowly, "there's something I need to tell you." At that moment, the bedroom door burst open, and Vincent Montgomery entered, accompanied by two large, well-dressed men. Vincent was a younger, crueler version of Nathan, with the same dark eyes, but without any trace of kindness in them. "What a touching reunion," said Vincent sarcastically. "The dead brother resurrected, and his little, small-town whore." Nathan tried to stand up, but was still too weak. "Vincent," he said, "you won't succeed." "Succeed at what? Keeping you committed for the rest of your life?" "Of course I will. You're mentally unstable, Nathan. Everyone knows that. And now that you've brought this woman back, I can finally solve all the problems at once." Vincent signaled to his henchman, who approached the bed. "Where's my son?" asked Vincent. "Adrian betrayed you," said Emily. "He chose the right side." "Adrian is a sentimental idiot," replied Vincent. "But he's my son. He'll do what I tell him to." It was then that Emily heard the sound of sirens approaching. Vincent heard it too and frowned. "What is that?" The answer came when Adrian appeared at the door, accompanied by two federal agents and a district attorney. "Arrest of Vincent Montgomery," announced one of the agents, "for kidnapping, false imprisonment, document, forgery, and attempted murder." Vincent tried to run, but the henchman, seeing the situation was lost, surrendered him without resistance. "You betrayed me," shouted Vincent to Adrian as he was handcuffed. "You raised me to be your soldier," replied Adrian calmly, "but you forgot to teach me not to have a conscience." After the police took Vincent and his men away, Emily, Nathan, and Adrian were left alone in the mansion. The silence was heavy, laden with everything that had happened, and everything that still needed to be resolved. "Thank you," said Nathan to Adrian. "You saved my life." "I didn't do it for you," replied Adrian, looking at Emily. "I did it for her." Emily stood up and walked to the window, observing the sea that had witnessed so much love and so much pain in her life. She felt the weight of the moment, the importance of the decision she needed to make. "Emily," said Nathan, "I understand if you choose to stay with him. Adrian can give you things I never can: stability, peace, a normal life." "And you," said Adrian, "what can you give her?" Nathan thought for a long moment before answering. "I can give her everything that I am, my flaws, my traumas, my demons, but also my absolute, unconditional, eternal love. I can give her an intensity that will burn until the last day of our lives." Emily turned to the two men, knowing that the time for the final choice had come. "There's something you both need to know," she said, "something that will change everything." She took a deep breath, placing her hand on her stomach. "I'm pregnant. Again!" The silence that followed was absolute. Nathan and Adrian observed her, processing the information. "Whose is it?" asked Adrian. Emily looked him in the eyes. "I don't know." It was true. In the last 2 months, Emily had had a few casual encounters in San Francisco, trying to forget the loneliness that consumed her. One of them could be the father, or perhaps not. But when she saw the reaction of the two men to the news, Emily knew exactly what she needed to do. She walked to Nathan and knelt in front of him. "You asked me if we can start over," she said. "The answer is yes, but not as we were before, as new people who have learned from their mistakes, who have chosen love despite all the pain." Nathan pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that had been purified by suffering. "What if the baby isn't mine?" he asked against her lips. "Then it will be ours," replied Emily, "just as Lily is already ours, just as this life we're going to build together will be ours." Adrian observed them for a moment, then smiled sadly. "You deserve each other," he said. "What you have is greater than anything I could offer." "Adrian," said Emily without moving away from Nathan, "thank you for everything. You'll always have a special place in my life. "And you in mine," he replied. "Take care of yourselves and be happy." 6 months later, Emily was sitting on the veranda of Vista Point Estate, watching Lily play in the garden while Nathan painted a new canvas. This time, it was a portrait of a family: Emily, Lily, and the baby who would be born in a few weeks. The face of the woman in the painting was complete, radiant, finally found. Nathan had used the fortune inherited after Vincent's imprisonment to create a foundation supporting women in vulnerable situations. Emily had opened a restoration studio in the mansion itself, teaching the art to young people from the region. Lily ran through the gardens of the property as if she had been born there, calling Nathan Daddy with the naturalness of someone who had never known another world. When the baby was born, a green-eyed girl like her mother with a strong temperament like her father, Emily named her Isabella, not after Nathan's dead wife, but for the strength and beauty that name represented. Isabella Montgomery Hayes came into the world screaming, demanding attention, love, and a full life from the first moment. On the night they brought Isabella home, Emily and Nathan sat on the bed watching the two daughters sleep in the makeshift crib. "Are you sure you don't mind?" asked Emily, referring to Isabella's uncertain biological paternity. "Emily," said Nathan, kissing her forehead, 3 years ago you taught me that love has nothing to do with blood or DNA. It has to do with choice. I choose to be this girl's father every day for the rest of my life." Emily nestled in his arms, finally at peace. "I love you," she whispered. "And I love you until the end of time," replied Nathan. Outside the window, the Bayshore Sea sang its eternal song, a silent witness to a love that had survived secrets, lies, separations, and pain, a love that had proven to be stronger than all the forces that tried to destroy it. Emily fell asleep in Nathan's arms, knowing she had finally found her place in the world. She was no longer the simple girl who once cleaned other people's houses, dreaming of a different destiny. She was a woman who had fought for her love, faced her demons, and built with her own hands the life she always deserved to have. And when she woke the next morning, with Nathan painting the sunrise and the daughters playing in the garden, Emily knew that all the storms had been worth it.